It's a war that has crossed 1,000 days and still continues. Black Sea vibrates with war cries. It's humid with the agony of the distressed. Displaced millions run away from its shores as the winter freezing cold reverberates with missile war sounds and lightning. What started in February 2022 still continues as neither side backs off. Instead, in its vortex, the world gets drawn in little by little. The Statue of Liberty stands thousands of miles away from the Black Sea on another continent. But its political change of guard has caused ripples of desperation in and around the Black Sea. Russia has stepped up its attack. War-torn Ukraine tries to defend and mount a counter-offensive. But its borrowed strength from the allies or the support from the White House is draining. Ukrainians try to stand as a resilient force against Russian aggression.
1000 днів це не просто цифра.
1,000 days is not just a number, it is 1,000 days of struggle. Struggle, indomitability and unity.
І жертовність.
Ukraine vows to fight for itself as the war calendar slowly turns another page to another year and the conflict edges to enter its fourth year.
In decisive moments, and they will come next year, we must ensure that no one in the world doubts the resilience of our entire nation. At this stage of the war, the question is, who will prevail? Either we will defeat the enemy or the enemy will defeat us. Ukrainians, Europeans and everyone in the world who want to live freely and not under the rule of a single dictator.
Підпорядковане якомусь одному диктатору. Сам народ і є те, що можна зробити тільки в єдності.
The world has tried to constrain Russia with multiple sanctions. They tried to isolate it. But Moscow has roared back and has remained defiant against all odds.
Мы считаем себя вправе применять наше оружие против военных объектов.
We consider ourselves entitled to use our weapons against military facilities of those countries that allow their weapons to be used against our facilities. And in the event of an escalation of aggressive actions, we will respond decisively and reciprocally. I recommend that the ruling elites of those countries that are hatching plans to use their military contingents against Russia seriously think about this.
Another frosty winter waits for spring. Missiles light up the sky, and air sirens warn the passerby of the war in Black Sea. Friday morning, 2 people died and 12 others were injured in a Russian drone attack on Ukraine's northeastern city of Sumy. Police reported that 12 apartment buildings as well as private residences and cars were damaged during the attack. Russia warns of acceleration of troops' advance in Ukraine.
Because of the combat work you have done here, the best Ukrainian units were destroyed. And because of the accelerated advance, in fact, the entire 2025 campaign has been disrupted.
Hours before this, Russia fired an intercontinental ballistic missile during an attack on the Ukrainian city of Dnipro. The missile attack damaged an industrial enterprise and struck a rehabilitation center for people with disabilities.
The Russian military have used various ballistic missiles to attack Ukraine throughout this entire fight. What is different is missiles that tend to be intermediate range missiles, and almost every intercontinental ballistic missile are nuclear capable. And so what that means is normally they're viewed as part of a nation's strategic nuclear triad, in the case of Russia. Now, in this case, using a very long-range missile against a very close target is used as messaging by Russia towards the West. In this case, the official reason that's been put out is the Russian government does not like the fact that Western supplied air-launched cruise missiles, in this case Storm Shadows, were used into Russian territory. Note that these missiles are much shorter in range than the hundreds of missiles that Russia has been firing into Ukraine. So in general, it's not any different than what Russia's already been doing in a mirrored sense. However, Russia has taken particular anxiety to use of Western missiles into Russian territory.
And the intent of warning was worded in no veiled terms by the Russian president himself within hours of firing it.
В ответ на применение американского и британского дальнобойного оружия
In response to the use of American and British long-range weapons on November 21st of this year, the Russian armed forces launched a combined strike on one of the facilities of the Ukrainian defense industry. One of the newest Russian medium-range missile systems was tested in combat conditions. In this case, with a ballistic missile in a non-nuclear hypersonic warhead.
баллистической ракеты в безъядерном гиперзвуковом оснащении.
Ukraine on Wednesday used British Storm Shadow missiles. The Kremlin claimed to have shot down both of them within Ukrainian territory. A day before, on Tuesday, the day Russian invasion of Ukraine turned 1,000 days old, Ukraine fired 6 US-made Army tactical missile systems into Russia.
1,000 days, I think it's enough to understand that Putin doesn't want any peace. Even this day, this is the fact, not some such words or something like this, not rhetoric. I mean, even this day, they killed our civilians. Even especially this day, they presented nuclear weapons strategy. Why? They didn't present peace strategy. Did you hear it? Did you read about it? No, of course, nuclear weapons strategy. Because he wants just to make chaos in the world. He wants to destroy Ukraine not only, and some other countries of NATO, and etc. I don't want to go deeply further to this. I don't want to repeat very simple things. Putin wants war.
It's a matter of survival for both Ukraine and Russia. Ukraine needs support from European partners and from across the Atlantic to survive the wrath unleashed by Moscow. While Russia needs its allies to stand by and actively participate to save it from falling apart in its ambitious and defiant war. The Russian State Duma on Thursday approved the government's draft budget for 2025 to 2027 with a record amount allocation on defense spending.
Ирина Андреевна, спасибо, что вы участвуете в рассмотрении законопроекта федерального закона о федеральном бюджете на 2020. Спасибо. Спасибо.
The bill earmarks 32.5% of Moscow's outlay to defense. That's a clear up from a reported 28.3% this year, totaling just under 13.5 trillion rubles. Russia seeks to prevail in the conflict in Ukraine.
We are facing a historic challenge from the West. To do this, it is necessary to form a new tax and budget policy. The solution is simple, but it requires political will. We need to solve 3 problems. The first is to mobilize resources. The second is to unite society. And the third is to clearly define priorities and select personnel capable of implementing them. To do this, we need not just a budget, but a victory budget.
For the victory, Russia is playing its own checkered diplomatic game.
С нами ли портал News.ru? Да. Да, у меня брифинг.
Russia's foreign ministry spokesperson was phoned during a live briefing on Thursday and told not to comment on reports Russia had fired a ballistic missile at Ukraine.
Hello.
Yes, I'm at a briefing.
About the ballistic missile strike on Yuzmash that the Western media are talking about, we are not commenting at all.
Yes, okay, thank you.
Ukraine claimed Russia has fired the ballistic missile. The West believed it, but Kremlin refused to accept it. Just like it refused to accept that the North Korean troops were engaged in the Kursk region fighting a Russian war. Instead, more than 70 animals and birds from Moscow Zoo have been flown to Pyongyang as a gift from Russian President Vladimir Putin. A Russian government delegation was at Pyongyang to discuss trade, economy, science and technology. Bilateral cooperation in different fields, including power, agriculture, education, public health and tourism, was also on the table between the two countries. Pyongyang and Moscow have ramped up diplomatic and economic exchanges in the past few years in which Russia has been slapped with multiple sanctions by the West for Ukrainian invasion. On 19th November, the day the war turned 1,000 days old, Russian forces took over control of Novoselivka settlement in Donetsk region. Russia continues to hit Ukraine hard, targeting its energy facilities as the winter sets in. And at the same time, Moscow insists on being open to peace talks to resolve the conflict.
The key here is to take into account interests of our country.
Just like North Korea, Russia engaged with its allies like Egypt to rally its own power axis. It successfully conducted a strategic nuclear exercise in the last days of October, and then Russian President Vladimir Putin approved changes to Russia's nuclear weapons policy, lowering the threshold for a nuclear strike in response to a broader range of conventional attacks.
Update of the military doctrine does not add anything which the West wouldn't know, and does not add anything which would be different, let me put it this way, from the American doctrinal documents on what to do with nuclear weapons. We are convinced that the nuclear weapon is first and foremost a weapon to constrain any, prevent any nuclear war.
Russia remains defiant in its own stand and continues to play its own power games that eerily resembles the Cold War era power division of allies. More than 1,300 kilometers away from Kiev in Ukraine, Kursk is a city and the administrative center of Kursk Oblast of Russia, located at the confluence of the Kur, Tuskar and Seam rivers. It's the battleground under attack radar from Ukraine in response to Russian push in Donbas region. It is also the region where the North Koreans are fighting the war on behalf of Russia.
There was also a separate report today from the main intelligence directorate and foreign intelligence service regarding North Korean military personnel in Russia. Already 11,000 in the Kursk region. We see an increase in North Koreans, but unfortunately we don't see an increased reaction from our partners.
Ukrainian Airborne Assault Brigade released drone footage said to show strikes on Russian troops in the Kursk region. South Korean National Intelligence Service claimed that North Korea has also shipped additional arms for the war in Ukraine, including self-propelled howitzers and multiple rocket launchers.
Additionally, not only is North Korea sending troops, but we have also detected that North Korea is exporting additional military supplies. It has been confirmed that North Korea has exported 170 mm self-propelled howitzers and 240 mm multiple rocket launchers, even long-range artillery following shell missiles.
Biden administration has decided to allow Ukraine to use American-supplied anti-personnel landmines to help slow Russia's battlefield progress in the war. This marks a second major shift on U.S. military support for Kiev in days.
We always adapt and adjust our policies based on real-world events, and the real-world events that we have seen are Russian advances, specifically Russian infantry advances in eastern Ukraine, and these non-persistent anti-personnel landmines are designed to blunt those types of infantry advances. They are very different from the landmines that the Russians have deployed and that you have seen other militaries, including our own military, deployed decades ago.
U.S. assistance for Ukraine does not end there. White House is expected to announce new military aid for Ukraine.
And later today, the White House will be announcing additional security assistance for Ukraine worth up to $275 million to meet critical battlefield needs, and that will include munitions for rocket systems and artillery and anti-tank weapons.
There are about 2 months left before the Biden administration makes way for the return of Trump in White House. Ukraine and Europe are preparing for a final push in this war against Russia. The new U.S. air defense base in northern Poland is perceived as a direct threat by the Kremlin.
This step fits into long-term destructive practice of dragging NATO's military infrastructure close to Russian borders. It clearly leads to undermining of strategic stability, alongside other harmful moves of military, political and technical nature aimed at projection of American military might far from USA national territory in order to put pressure on Russia and some other nuclear states.
Это естественным образом ведет к нарастанию стратегических.
The next 50 days are going to be crucial as both sides are going to test each other's limits to crack an opening favoring themselves in this war. It's nowhere close to an end as it inches closer to its third anniversary. Kiev residents and Ukrainian servicemen lit 1,000 candles beneath the city's towering Ukrainian motherland monument statue on Tuesday. Ukrainians marked 1,000 days since Russia's full-scale invasion on 24 February 2022. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky presented a resilience plan in the parliament.
In decisive moments, and they will come next year, we must ensure that no one in the world doubts the resilience of our entire nation. At this stage of the war, the question is, who will prevail? Ukrainians, Europeans, and everyone in the world who wants to live freely and not under the rule of a single dictator.
The Ukrainian president expects the pivotal moments for Ukraine to be in 2025, and till then he warned his country to remain steadfast and resilient.
This battle is not just about Pokrovsk, Kupiansk or any of our Ukrainian cities, towns or villages. It's not just about one region or another. This battle is about all of Ukraine. It's a battle for all of Europe, for order or chaos for the entire world. And while the whole world waits for a miracle from Trump, God's mercy, we cannot afford to wait. We must not lose our resilience. We must work hard.
Ukraine plans reforms in the military, frontline strategies, weapons production, economic strengthening, energy security, cultural sovereignty, and memorialization policy of those killed in the war. The plan to be tabled in the parliament in December will include the creation of a military ombudsman position and a new system of military contracts. There are no plans to lower the mobilization age, and priority in weapons production will focus on drones as they compensate for ammunition shortages. Ukraine plans to produce at least 30,000 long-range drones and aims to manufacture 3,000 long-range missiles in the next year.
The full internal resilience plan for our state, along with all its appendices, will be presented and delivered this December. The key focus is true resilience for Ukraine. 1,000 days of war, 1,000 days since Ukrainians punched Putin in the mouth. We must bring this war to an end, and to end it on just terms, but in such a way that even a toothless Putin never returns to Ukraine again.
Relatives of Ukrainian prisoners of war gathered at a rally in Kiev on Tuesday to remember their loved ones.
I'm waiting for my husband and his 75 brothers in arms to return from captivity. They were taken prisoner at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant. You can say that our lives have stopped. Without our close ones, it's simply stopped. How can one bomb its brotherly country, Ukraine, sitting in Moscow, firing S-200 and S-300 missiles, Grad rockets at defenseless people? I never expected Putin to do such a terrible thing to his brotherly Ukraine.
Air sirens have become part of daily life in Kiev. Its piercing sound alerts Ukrainians of the 1,000+ days of war relentlessly.
I got used to it. We are students and we live in the university dormitory. So every time air raid siren goes off, we go to the shelter.
Are you expecting anything unusual today?
I don't know.
I think yes, I am very scared today. Many telegram channels warned about possible air raid alerts and urged to act accordingly.
I have my grab bag ready. I live nearby. I'm ready and I'm worried. But I think it will be fine because our armed forces are the best. Everything will be fine. I hope so.
The Hungarian Prime Minister has warned the world not to take Russian President Vladimir Putin's words lightly. He's the next door neighbor, very much like that of Ukraine.
When dealing with a country like Russia, which is fundamentally different from us and bases its policies primarily on military power, its position in the world and its vision for the future are largely defined by the fact that it possesses one of the strongest armies in the world, equipped with the most advanced and destructive weapons. When they say something in this matter, it should be understood the way they say it.
Yet experts believe de-escalation is not the answer to Putin's warnings. European countries ramping up their support for Ukraine as they fear a change of guard in the White House could also mean change of cross-Atlantic support for a European conflict.
So really how this plays depends on how the West is going to respond to Putin's threats. De-escalation, as ever, would be the most dangerous possible response because it would show to Russia once again that these threats work and encourage more of them in the future.
We are faced especially with our Eastern European partners like the Baltic countries, Poland, our big neighbor from German side, directly at the border to Ukraine, that obviously Putin tries to divide Europe and tries to push Europe in the corner by a huge refugee flow, by attacking Kiev and whole Ukraine so heavily as we haven't seen in the last 1,000 days, and also with missiles which haven't been used before. The only purpose is that we resign to support Ukraine and by that standing up for our European peace order. But playing with fear was a recipe which Putin used already before February 24th. And we did the big mistakes that we underestimated that. We have learned since 1,000 days that the best protection of our European peace is to support Ukraine in its self-defense until Putin stops this horrible war.
Russian ally North Korea is also preparing itself just as Ukraine's European support base. Kim Jong-un, much like his Russian counterpart, believes his past negotiations with the United States only confirmed Washington's unchangeable hostility towards Pyongyang and described this nuclear buildup as the only way to counter external threats. Both sides are preparing for a breakthrough before spring sets in. This frosty winter, Kiev and Moscow will be relying on their respective allies and friends to reach their goals. There would be no freezing calm in black this new year. because the war continues.